quick introduction to Julie. I've known of Julie for about 5 or 6 years. I joined Capital One around that time, and I've met so many amazing people at Capital One. One of those amazing people, her name is Katie. I know she's here in the audience today. And how do I know that? Because I sent her an email last night to make sure that she was actually going to join. Katie, I didn't know if you knew that was why I did that. But anyway, the exciting part about that is Katie's actually in Japan. So it's midnight where she is. And so wanted to make sure that she would actually join. The reason I mentioned Katie is because Katie went on an incredible journey with Julie. And Katie and Julie and many other incredible people at Capital One really worked hard to increase the diversity and inclusion of that company. And they actually founded and scaled the Women in Technology group at Capital One. And it was just massively successful. I can count myself as one of the benefactors of that, having gone to several of the Women in Technology conferences at Capital One and learning a lot about how to be an ally. Julie has also been a foundational partner with the Women in Code group throughout her time at Capital One and since. And Katie actually introduced me to Julie a couple of months ago, and Julie and I talked about potentially coming in and giving a kind of the opening keynote at our conference, and she was very excited to do it. So I really can't thank Katie or Julie enough for all you've done and connecting some dots, and also Julie for agreeing to come in and talk about belonging, diversity, and inclusion and equity here within the Dev Community Summit. We feel like that is a very integral core part of our mission, and we're very excited to see what it is you have to say. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Julie.
Jared, thank you so much. I'm humbled to be here with all of you today, and just really thank you for inviting me here. I'm going to share a little bit about my career journey and some lessons that I think might apply to all of you, and also, of course, talk about my passion around diversity and inclusion, especially in the tech industry. I know we may be a little tight for time, but please do put your questions in if you have them. We will try to get to some of those, and what we don't get to, I will certainly go into Slack and try to answer as many questions as I can. I'm so glad everybody's here from all over the globe. Katie, yay. I always say that, like, you know, you are spared from watching me pace a stage, which I'm famous for since we are not live, but I also miss my head nodders. So I'm virtually imagining all of you out there being my head nodders as we go through this to get my energy. So I'm going to jump right in since we're already a little running a little behind. But a good colleague of mine said to a group of us after we had been working through years of transformational work, it is only in looking backward that we can see how far we've come. And it really stuck with me, those simple words, but it is only in looking backward that we can see how far we've come. And don't you find that in the moments of our busy lives and our career, we sometimes feel like progress is really slow and the milestones towards achieving our goals just seem to come way too infrequently? I know I felt it in my own career. I hear it from my children quite often and early in their careers. And so we do feel sometimes that impatience in the moment. But I can tell you that after 35 years in technology, it is only in looking backward that I can see how really far we have come. The technology change through my career has been beyond comprehension. To think these little devices, right, that we hold in our hands today, that all of you code upon, have more storage and more compute capacity than those mainframes that filled the data centers in my early years. And the accessibility and pervasiveness of technology is transforming everything about our lives and shaping our futures. And I will tell you that the tech field itself has changed quite a lot since my early days, both in demographic and culture. And quite honestly, not all of that has been positive. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that later as we get through the talk. But it is only in looking backward that I can sum up the threads that have run through my career and I think through the tech industry and what I've titled the talk today, Unexpected Pathways, Alternate Routes, and the Power of Empathetic Curiosity. So hopefully I can give you some insights, a little history lesson or two, and maybe inspire you all to help others in their journey to get into and to stay in tech. So I'm going to take you back now 34 years to 1987. I know for some of you, you probably were not even born. I know some of you were not even born. But I had just completed my Bachelor of Science degree at Miami University. It was a school that I had aspired to attend ever since I was a little girl. And we would drive from my small hometown in Indiana through Oxford, Ohio, to my grandmother's house in Cincinnati. And I just had such a great experience there that I stayed for graduate school. And I was teaching as a graduate assistant in math when I kept getting this pit in my stomach. I was pretty sure that I was on the wrong path towards trying to get a PhD and spending my life in academia, which obviously, you know, I didn't do. So I was like, well, now what am I going to do? Right. So I quit this graduate program that I was in at the end of the semester, and I literally typed up a resume, didn't have a PC. And, you know, here I am. I have this degree in math. I'd worked through college. I'd worked at McDonald's and campus jobs. I'd even actually been a bank teller and a branch manager at a little bank while I was in college. And I had worked at Barleycorns as a server, where I have to tell you, I think I gained some of my most important people skills that I've carried through my life. For any of you who have worked in restaurants, you can probably relate. So I sent out these cries for help to people I knew, and I applied for jobs. And lo and behold, I had two offers. One was to be a customer service manager at this firm that supplied a 1987 version of technology solutions to little banks. And the other one was to be a computer programmer for a regional bank, where they had agreed to teach me to code. Mind you, I was a math major. So I accepted the customer service management job. It felt safe to me. I knew the systems as a user from the bank where I'd worked, and I had management experience, mind you, as a 20-year-old as a branch manager. And so this job just felt right for me. And, you know, I didn't have I only had a couple coding classes in college, and I didn't have a computer science degree. And so that coding job seemed really scary to me. And I probably had learned as a woman that I should only take a job where I was 100% qualified. But you know what, as the days started passing towards my start date, and that bank that wanted me to code called me back a few times and even upped their offer a little bit, I had this pit in my stomach again. I was pretty sure that I was accepting the wrong job. But, you know, I had this sense of obligation that, you know, so it kept me really conflicted. And I talked to my dad about it, who I really respected, and he was a high integrity person having a great career of his own. And I can still hear him saying to me, Jewel, as he called me, this is your life, and it's just the beginning of your career. You don't owe it to that company that you haven't even started working for yet. Follow your gut and go for the job that you think you want, even if it does seem scary. And look, he said, if it doesn't work out to be a computer programmer, you can always be a customer service manager. Well, you guys can imagine what must have happened. On my start date, I went to Fifth Third Bank in downtown Cincinnati and quit the other job before I even started. I literally called them from Fifth Third to tell them I wasn't coming my first day because I decided over the weekend. Oh, don't recommend that. But look, it changed my career. My career started with this unexpected pathway. One I honestly wouldn't have ever walked down without following those little signals that were in my gut and the wisdom and support of my dad. And in looking backward, it is beyond a doubt that I chose the right road. It totally changed my life and even the life of my kids. I have to tell you that my early days learning to code were challenging. I remember sitting in these training sessions that were for all the newcomers, wondering where in the building is this library that apparently has all the code in it? I know you're laughing right now. I'm laughing at myself. I was learning through this alternate route on the job, and I felt intimidated by those people around me that seemed to have it all figured out, that had those computer science degrees. I had full-blown imposter syndrome, but I just really worked hard, and I engaged my curiosity, and I asked a ton of questions. And I had this amazing manager who just believed in growth mindset and gave me this chance to learn. And before you knew it, I knew where those libraries were. They were digital. Ha! And I had this head for logic. And so I was solving some of the most complex coding challenges. And pretty soon people were asking me questions. And I think it turns out that even though some people hide it, the early days of IT jobs are hard for pretty much everybody. I have to tell you a little bit about the people and the culture at the time. I loved the people I worked with in those early days. They looked a lot like these people in these photos. Didn't you like our suits and our CRTs? That was what it looked like. And I've always loved being around techie people. I love being here today with you all. And, most people didn't have much idea of what we did. We were called data processing at the time, and no one had technology in their homes or certainly in their hands. So, what we did was kind of a mystery to everybody, but we were really proud of the work that we did. We didn't care that we were behind the scenes, and we loved learning the business and really figuring out how technology could empower the business with new products and efficiencies. And another important point about those early days in my career, our team is nearly half women. And so for me, I never felt that it was at all unusual to be a woman in technology. And I really felt like I belonged. This is where I was supposed to be. And I do have to tell you that I wish that I had known early on in my pathway about these amazing women who had paved the way for women in tech. Women like Grace Hopper, whose compiler I was using every day. Yes, I was coding in COBOL. And Dorothy Vaughan, a hidden figure of NASA who led the group of Black women mathematicians, the people they called human computers. And she trained them in Fortran as soon as the new IBMs arrived. And Margaret Hamilton, who, I'm just in awe of. She was another NASA coder. And she actually wrote the code that saved the Apollo moon landing because she fought hard to include air routines in the code, assuming something could go wrong when her colleagues just wanted to code for the happy path. Fortunately, we've all learned to code for the unhappy path, right? And she's also credited with coining the term software engineer to put coding on the same level as hardware engineering. They were pioneers, but actually most of the early coders were in fact women. And we'll come back to that because boy, has that changed. There might be a little pun in there. So I'm going to take you now to 1995. Are my head nodders still with me? I hope. I'm seeing it. I had just started a new role at another bank. I was still coding on mainframes. And I recall going to my class reunion that summer, and one of my classmates who was working at the Pentagon said to me, "Are you on the World Wide Web?" Knowing that I worked in technology. Well, I know if I could hear all of you right now, you would be laughing hysterically, but in fact, it was 1995, and all I could say was no, but tell me more about it. And as he explained it all to me, I thought, something big is about to happen, and my curiosity was piqued. So I went back to the office on Monday morning after my class reunion, and I said, "What are we doing to get on the World Wide Web?" And I was really excited to find that one of our IT executives was, in fact, trying to get us set up with our first web pages. But all my questions and interest in the topic actually set me on a new pathway. I was asked to join this team that was working on this whole suite of new digital banking products. So the time when the internet was just making its way into business and crawling, quite honestly, into people's homes was one of the most exciting times to have worked in technology. I know you're all jealous. I was working on one of the very first home banking applications in the country, and it wasn't even internet yet. It was dial-up modems, hearing those little beeps in my head now. We were all learning this together because there really were no experts yet. The field was so new. And I would even go out to people's houses to try to figure out how to get them set up as they struggled to learn this new technology, because we didn't even really understand it all either, and had to learn how to make it easier. And I was even at this time working on banking on a phone. Now, I know, given that I'm talking to a bunch of mobile experts, you're all thinking that 1995 seems a little early to have been working on banking on a phone. How cool is that, you're asking? Well, it was super cool. We had a way to deliver balances, transactions, and let people transfer money between accounts on a phone. Well, here is that phone. It's on the screen, but if you can see me, it's also here. Okay, I hear you all laughing again. Here is this nice phone. We called it a screen phone. Well, I have to say that we were once again back in people's houses trying to figure out how this thing worked. We'd ordered a few hundred of these for a pilot. We probably gave out about 20 of them. It didn't really take off, as I'm sure doesn't surprise you, but look, it was the right idea, right? Not everyone had a PC yet. And so this seemed like a good logical alternative, but it turns out this form factor just isn't quite right. People don't really want this humongous phone sitting around in their house just to check their bank balances. And so, I know that it turns out that we needed, it to be on this form factor and to go with us every day and we can't imagine living without it. I'm sure people have checked their balance today on their account or responded to a fraud alert or something, with our mobile banking apps that we all use today. And that wasn't the only thing that we were doing at the time. We actually had created biometric access to the room that had all of our technology in it. Now that seems like so routine now, but it was pretty cool. We created a tellerless branch in a mall that had an ATM and a kiosk where you could sit down and create a video link to customer service. And we put voice recognition for bill payment on our IVR system. And in 1995, this was all really bleeding edge stuff. We even held a big press conference about all our new technology. And it was such a cool time to be working in tech. I will tell you that this time was also so fundamentally important to the way that banking services were delivered. Everything changed. Technology ushered in this entirely new way of interacting with customers. And quite honestly, uptake was far quicker than we had anticipated. It turned out that people really do like self-service of routine transactions. And you know what? It forced us to clean up our back office operation. We spent as much time on that as we did anything else because customers were now seeing what we did every day online versus just those paper statements that we cut once a month where we could kind of clean up the transaction problems along the way. And when I reflect on this time, I know that it was the luckiest project I ever worked on in my career because it was so disruptive in technology and the chance to be a part of it at the time was just amazing. It created all the jobs that you all have now. And for me, it was again, this unexpected pathway from a mathematician to a mainframe coder to implementing internet banking and screen phones and tellerless branches. I mean, it was pretty mind numbing. We didn't all take off in 1995, but we learned so much about how people will and will not interact with technology. It was such a cool time. And I have to tell you that there was this huge smile on my face when I was just recently in the very same shopping mall this year, 2021, and a top tier bank that you can see here was putting in a new way to bank with video conferencing and a tellerless branch. And I could just stand there and say, hey, I did this in this very same mall 16 years ago. Pretty darn cool. So from here, after all this cool stuff, my career kept continuing to be amazing. And I was quickly learning. I had found myself creating solutions for companies instead of consumers because I switched over to commercial banking. And it was a fantastic challenge to imagine how to apply technology to a field that is all about bankers having relationships with corporate executives, CFOs, and accountants at companies, where they thought of technology more as an efficiency play than innovation because they believed that it just didn't apply to their expert work. But it turns out I've spent 2/3 of my career in commercial banking and really, really loved it. I ended up becoming the commercial bank CIO at the same bank, Fifth Third, where I'd started my career. And I'd been there a total of 18 years because I went back and I just kind of assumed I would retire from there. But this little pit in my stomach was back. You might notice by now that I carry stress in my stomach. But this time it was based on the culture. And everything had changed since I had started there back in 1987. And I was just feeling like I no longer belonged. I realized that I was waking up every day, spending way more energy on people and culture challenges than I was on the work itself. And I was also just starting to be a little bit curious about what could be discovered if I, looked at other options besides working for the same company for more years. Well, at just this time, this little company in Virginia called me about being their commercial bank CIO. It was those what's in your wallet people. And everything about this seemed like a big risk at the time. There was a tiny team. They had huge aspirations for growth of the business, but they all had everything outsourced to vendors. It meant moving out of the Midwest for the first time for my husband and I and leaving our family behind. But something kept calling me, besides the fact that it was an amazing opportunity to build something from scratch. And it was the people. After months of talking to a lot of people, I sensed this consistent culture where I was feeling like I was really going to be able to belong, where I would be valued. And that sense of belonging meant everything to me in my career at that point, after what I had experienced over the last few years. And honestly, it does to everyone, right? Because we know how it feels when you don't belong. And we know that we can't do our best work. And, maybe you had that experience in your job, maybe you had it in school, but if you think back about a time that you didn't feel like you belong, you know that is very distracting. And so a culture of belonging really matters to sourcing and retaining talent. It mattered to Capital One. It got me there. And I think it matters now more than ever. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But so here I chose this unexpected pathway again and made my way to Capital One over in Richmond, Virginia. And I'm just going to skip to the conclusion. I spent 10 years at Capital One, and it was nothing short of amazing, best 10 years of my career. I built out my team from 28 people that were there when I got there to 700. The commercial bank business just grew rapidly while I was part of it. And I was also part of this tech executive team inside of a company that was reinventing itself, going to where the future was going, becoming a bank, a technology company would build. All of you at Capital One know those buzzwords that we've used. But it was really true. We insourced, we converted to Agile, we built our own software. And you know what? Technology was again becoming this massively disruptive force in business, not dissimilar to what I had seen at the time of the internet. And Capital One was responding in a big way. Cloud computing and the resulting rapid decline in costs of storage and compute finally made the promise of big data and machine learning a reality. And so applying machine learning to a B2B business wasn't intuitive, right, at first, because you're not dealing with millions of customers and billions of transaction records. But in commercial banking, the decisions are high risk because you're lending millions of dollars and processing billions of dollars of payments. And so we found that by applying machine learning to the wealth of supplementary data sources that couldn't be processed by humans, things like neighborhood trends, for example, we could add information to the human decision process, making it more accurate, more efficient, quicker, and allowing them to expand the business because they had a more refined view of risk. And of course, everything was going digital. Our business customers were consumers too, and they knew what was possible from all the apps they had on their phone. So by talking to our customers, we learned what they wanted to do via that human interaction and where they really wanted the efficiency of self-service, what they wanted to do in front of their computer at their office versus what they wanted to do on the go. And it turns out they really did want access to the tools on their mobile devices. And this wasn't obvious at first, and not everybody thought that that would be the case, but now we would all, of course, realize that that would be the case. So we did build some native mobile apps called IntelliX for the business customers, where they could see their account information and transact some business and approve transactions initially. And then the more we gave them on the mobile app, of course, the more they wanted there, in addition to the web. So pretty cool stuff, building one of the first robust native mobile apps in the commercial banking business. And, the last decade in technology has been radically disruptive, probably as much or more so than those World Wide Web days. And it again is such a cool time to work in technology, as I'm sure all of you can attest. So in reflection of these points in my career that were super disruptive in technology, I've really learned some important lessons. The importance of being curious, of being empathetic to the challenges of the humans for whom we build technology, and taking risk and being bold. And that is where growth and innovation and unexpected pathways are born. We see this clearly in children, right? That their curiosity and their empathy is unbounded. It's how they grow and create. They take in the world and look for inspiration everywhere. But somehow we seem to forget that as adults. We get busy with our lives and our fear kicks in. And I really think we need to take those calculated risks, and we need to take time for that inspiration to experience everything we can in the world with the curiosity of a child and to empathize with everyone. So I've shared some of the key lessons from my career that I hope you can apply. But I have to tell you that the most important lessons of my career and of my life have happened in the last 7 years. And I could have quite honestly missed out on all of these learnings had I not engaged my authentic, empathetic curiosity. So I'm going to take you now to 2014. Jared gave you a little precursor to this, but I was 4 years into my commercial CIO role at Capital One, and we were deep in our digital transformation. And I was just heads down, really growing my team and learning new technologies, and apparently not paying much attention to what was happening in the bigger picture of the tech workforce. Until these two young ladies came into my office. They were just a year out of college and asked to meet with me. Some of you know them, I'm sure. Katie Thompson, hello, Katie, and Kaylin Gibaltera. And these ladies honestly changed my life, and I can't thank them enough. And they inspired and changed a lot of other lives just by taking action that day back in 2014. At the time, Kaylin had just started the Women Who Code chapter in the Washington, D.C. area, and Katie was actually learning to code through that chapter. So I do want to pause a moment and just appreciate Women Who Code. Thank you to everyone who's joined today for supporting the organization with your attendance. It is such a great organization. Kaylin introduced me to the founder, Elena Percival, back in 2014. And when Elena sat at dinner with me and shared her vision, I knew I had to figure out how we at Capital One were going to support that mission. And I think maybe there were 20,000 members, if that, at the time, and now over nearly 300,000 members around the globe. Thank you again for making the contribution to the organization today. And I know since we don't have an audience, I can't ask all the Women Who Code members to stand up, but I'd love it if you would put in the chat or in the Slack channel that you are a Women Who Code member and where you're joining the summit from today. Katie's joining from Japan. Yay. And by the way, this New York Stock Exchange picture, I was supposed to be in that picture that day. I sat in an airport for hours, and at midnight the night before, my flight was canceled, so I didn't make it. But I love Women Who Code and would have loved to have been there that day to support them. So I want to go back to my story about Katie and Kaylin. That day in my office, they shared with me what was happening in the industry. They shared with me facts like 18% of computer science graduates were women. And they told me stories about some of their friends who were conveying to them that they were having such a terrible experience in tech that they were actually thinking about dropping out. They felt like Capital One was such a great place to work for women, and they thought that we should just be part of the industry conversation. And they asked if we could support Women Who Code and the Grace Hopper Conference, which is, one of the largest tech conferences for women in tech. It was a simple enough ask. But I have to tell you, my curiosity was piqued. My empathy kicked in for these women who were having such a terrible experience. And so I started to do more research with Katie and Kaylin. I read, I listened to stories, I sought out information because clearly I had missed something since my own experience had been pretty different. And here's what I started to learn. Women were only 25% of the tech workforce. Even though girls start with equal interest and aptitude for STEM, we start to lose them as early as junior high, and they leak out of the educational process all the way through until we get to that 18% of graduates, computer science graduates being women. But then even when women entered the tech workforce, and I shouldn't use past tense because this is still true, they're dropping out at double the rate of men. Over half of the women left the field entirely by the midpoint of their career, citing reasons that were about not feeling like they belonged or couldn't realize their career aspirations. And it was no wonder with all of that leakage that we ended up with only 25% of women in tech. And I can tell you, because Katie and Kaylin were mobile engineers, I recall that we found out at the time that only 3% of mobile engineers were women. And I sure hope that has changed. I couldn't find a current number, but I'm hoping that that's changing. And I'm hoping all of you are helping that change. And I did mention earlier that it wasn't that way when I started. Women were 40% of the tech workforce in 1990 and 37% of computer science graduates. Those were the peaks, but it has just gone backwards since then. And I know this is often shocking to people because they don't think that women were ever part of tech. But as I mentioned, all the early coders were in fact women. And sadly, women's representation in tech has remained flat since 2014. Some numbers even say it's down to 24%. And the same representation challenge exists for Black and Hispanic people. They're represented in the tech workforce at half the rate they're represented in the overall workforce. And when you look intersectionally at women of color, including Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, and Asian women, they make up less than 10% of tech workers. And back in 2014, these headlines like these were prevalent. Remember how I said a culture of belonging really matters to sourcing talent? An overt culture of exclusion matters even more. And I remember being so frustrated at the time. I was kind of angry with myself for like missing that this was happening in this industry that I loved. And I was frustrated that the culture was such that women were feeling like they didn't belong and just wanted to drop out entirely. I mean, it just didn't seem right. I knew that technology was an amazing place to build a career and a financially secure life, and that diversity brought value to the work. And I knew there were a lot of men around me that were just as shocked by the numbers as I was, and that this wasn't about blaming men. It was about seeing how we could all come together and see what went wrong and how we could fix the broken systems. So I decided then and there that something had to be done, that I had to be a part of it, that Capital One had to be a part of it, and that we were going to do more than just those sponsorships that Katie and Kaylin had asked for. And so as Jared mentioned, the Women in Tech Initiative was born at Capital One in 2014, grounds up, volunteer-led. We did sponsorships, mentorships, education, all kinds of activities. And the more we learned, the more we wanted to do. We had our first ever gathering of women in tech across Capital One. And I have to tell you, this fire was lit. This was early 2015. And we suddenly had an army of volunteers, both men and women, just wanting to see change in the tech field. We ended up building out a lot of programs and initiatives, including Blacks in Tech, Hispanics in Tech, Tech Allies, bias mitigation training, supported a lot of external organizations, university programs, and events. And I'm happy to say my friends at Capital One are still continuing this awesome work and continue to be an awesome sponsor of the Grace Hopper celebration that Katie and Kaylin had asked us to champion back then. As for me, about 2.5 years into the work, I started to realize that I woke up every day and I was most excited about my meetings that I had for the day that were related to our diversity inclusion work. I started to see it in the way that people kept taking pictures of me like this. Let's say I hadn't been on very many stages before this work. And so starting to see that my passion was showing up in my own body language was really powerful. And I felt so much more could be done. As an engineer, I felt that I could see the problem differently. I could break it down, I could find root causes, and we could really find solutions that would lead to real results. And so with the support of Capital One in 2017, I made diversity inclusion leadership 50% of my core job. And I was still getting to do some really fun tech things, like helping us figure out how to get off mainframes in our journey to the cloud. Here I was back on mainframes again. But I have to tell you, this D&I work was perhaps the most unexpected of all unexpected pathways. And I've learned a lot through this pathway about people and cultures and history and creating movements. I can't share everything because I hear that you actually might want to listen to some other speakers today. But I do want to share a few thoughts about what I've learned. You know, I was asked really early on, does it matter that we don't have diversity in the tech workforce? Well, it was an honest question, off-putting at first, of course, but I've found that I have answered this for myself and for others over and over and over again. There are a lot of reasons that it really matters. First of all, context is important. Why does it matter more in tech than anywhere else? To me, it's super important because we're in the midst of this digital revolution, right? Technology matters to all of us in ways we could have never imagined. Certainly, I couldn't have imagined when I entered this industry 30 years ago when tech was just in business, right? It's shaping everything about the way we experience the world in very fundamental ways, and it's shaping our economy. The degree to which companies embrace the digital revolution, right, really matters to their success. We've seen this quite overtly during the pandemic. Yet technology is created for humans by humans, right? And so with this backdrop of this mass impact that technology is having on everything, it matters to everyone, not just technologists, who's making the tech that will determine our futures. All kinds of research shows that diverse teams produce better ROI for their companies. Diverse teams are smarter, they're better at problem solving, and they make fewer mistakes. And it's not just because these teams have different perspectives, but there are real social dynamics at play that elevates everyone's performance. Homogeneous teams, it turns out, make assumptions about shared understanding and don't challenge each other as much as diverse teams. Diverse teams tend to share more conversation and they raise more challenges with each other. And BCG even found that diversity is related to innovation revenue. And gosh, if it's not important, if it's important anywhere, it's important in tech, right? I mean, it seems like we really need this type of innovation and problem solving in the tech field. And it's not to say that homogeneous teams don't produce good results. They do, like we've seen it, right? But it could just be so much better with diverse teams. And that thing about making fewer mistakes, that's the thing that really strikes me and how important it really is. You know, we have started to make our own mistakes in tech. We've always made them, but when we apply them to machine learning, they can really happen at scale. And that starts to be some really scary mistakes. I love the work by Joy Buolamwini and the Algorithmic Justice League on facial recognition software. Joy found that the early versions of facial recognition software from major providers were literally trained on data sets that I love. Joy calls it 75% male and 80% pale, which, as we all know, reflects more of the tech industry than it does the overall population. And this has had major implications because this software has been used pervasively in law enforcement, where inequity is already a challenge. And so maybe you've even seen in the last year that IBM pulled their facial recognition software off the shelves, given that they saw too much racial inequity in how it was being used. And other companies have banned the use of their software in law enforcement. And I have to ask myself, right, would a more diverse team have questioned the results and especially how that machine learning was trained? I think so, right? I mean, Joy questioned it immediately when, as an engineer, she was using the software for a project and she couldn't even be seen by the software unless she put on a white mask. That's sad. It still gets me teary when I think about it. We really need to be building products that work for the entire population. And that population is shifting, right? By 2045, non-Hispanic white people will be a minority in the United States. So we really do have to consider who we're building product for and what teams are going to create the best products for this changing customer base. But we also have to appreciate that changing and getting to gender and racial equity in tech is not just about building the best products. It's also about access to financial well-being, as tech jobs are some of the highest paying jobs in our economy. And they're the most future-proof. You can see in this McKinsey analysis that they predict that tech jobs are going to be up 34% by 2030, and I've seen even higher numbers. And physical work will be down 31%. And this is the important thing, right? We in tech, we're creating the automation that is eliminating those physical work jobs. So this economic divide along demographic lines is widening given the current demographics of tech and the declining jobs that are more heavily staffed by women and Black and brown people. So here's the conundrum, right? Tech has a lot of open jobs. We had 1 million open jobs in the first half of 2019, even through the pandemic. We're now back to September 2019 levels with nearly 400,000 open jobs. Unemployment is near zero, and tech jobs are continuing to grow, as we saw in the previous slide. But we can't fill all these jobs. Tech executives are constantly saying that the last couple of years that finding talent that they need is one of their top challenges, right up there with their cloud transformation, right? And yet we graduate less than 80,000 computer science related to graduates in universities in the United States a year. So this funnel that we have been relying on exclusively is really not going to help us very much with our jobs. And it's not a very diverse field, as I mentioned earlier. So this is the head scratcher for me, right? Tech has nearly 400,000 open jobs, while there are millions of people without work and many millions more who are working but earning at or below the poverty level. So that's what really keeps this fire lit for me, is this imbalance and inequity in the labor market and knowing what tech could do to solve for it. I know it's a really bold statement, but I firmly believe that the tech industry has kind of created some of its own labor shortage. If over half the population doesn't feel welcome, doesn't think they belong, or doesn't see themselves in the industry, or they join and then they drop out, how do we ever hope to fill all these open jobs, let alone have those better, more diverse teams that create better, more innovative solutions that serve the whole population? Well, the good news is we truly can do something about it as individuals and companies. And here's some ideas. So here's a little context. It turns out that the most defining factor that keeps people from advancing in their careers is whether or not they have a computer science degree. I'm sorry, a bachelor's degree, not a computer science degree, bachelor's degree. That's important too, but. And this was a real wake-up call for me, because here I was at Capital One trying to work on this whole diversity challenge for the tech field, and realizing that when we say no one without a 4-year degree need apply, we've eliminated over 75% of African-American workers, 80% of Hispanic workers, and even 80% of small town and rural workers. So we're kind of behind before we even started, just because we have that 4-year degree requirement on both our entry-level jobs and even experienced jobs. So we're missing all these people that have learned through alternative routes. And the irony of this is always for me that some of the heroes of our industry, right, like the Gates and Zuckerbergs, they don't even have bachelor's degree, but somehow we seem to think that it's super important to put them on all of our tech jobs. And the sad news is that 60% of workers don't have a 4-year degree. So 2/3 of the workforce is having access to only 1/3 of the newly created jobs, since 2/3 of the jobs require 4-year bachelor's degrees. And as a result of this, while tech salaries are going up and up and up, these workers without 4-year degrees have seen significant decline in their wages over the last decade. You know, I know we're a little behind. I'm going to keep going, and hopefully folks can stick around, because I have some really important summary coming up here. And so I know we're going to run over a little bit, but hopefully we can keep going. So I left Capital One last year to pursue my D&I passion full time. And I've been working as a senior advisor for a nonprofit called Opportunity at Work for the last year. They do amazing research, and their mission is to rewire the labor market for workers without degrees. And they identified that there are 71 million people in the United States that have no bachelor's degree. They're over 24, they're active in the workforce, they're working hard, they're acquiring skills all along the way of their career through work experience or military or community college, formal training like boot camps. And they come from all walks of life, all backgrounds, as you can see here. Opportunity at Work has coined the term STARS, people skilled through alternate routes. Many of them have the skills to do the work in tech, but we just don't ever give them a chance. We screen them out in our recruiting systems right at the top of the funnel because we put bachelor's degree required. We've never even assessed their skills. And we're missing people like Giancarlo Martinez. And I want you to hear his story from himself.
I'm a senior UI developer and designer, and I don't have a 4-year degree. I grew up in the South Bronx. My mom raised me and my sister, for the most part, as a single mother until she married my stepdad at age 10. School was always tough for me. I was not very good at doing homework. I was always distracted, trying to learn things that I wanted to learn. My mom believed in the traditional paths that I think a lot of immigrant moms believe in, which is you graduate from college and you become either a doctor, a lawyer, a businessman, or a politician. She never really saw a laptop as a tool for learning or anything that would really develop my career. So I started freelancing for a little bit, building 1- or 2-page websites for people. My parents started to see that I was somehow sustaining myself. The real turning point for them was when I had asked them to financially support me going to the Flatiron School coding bootcamp. The loan that my mom gave me was money that my mom had saved for a new car. I finished the 6-month boot camp. My teacher introduced me to Genome, which was my first professional employment. Once I gave my mom that call that I had gotten this job and that I was working in the World Trade Center with this amazing view, she was really proud. Within 3 months, I was able to pay back the loan that they gave me. When I went off to Yashi after Genome, really quickly before even getting too far down the interview path, I was given a coding challenge, and I found out that their team was working with React, but I had never coded in React. I actually told them, I can have this coding challenge done by tomorrow, or you can give me 2 more days and I'll do it in React. And they were like, that's not possible. But I did it. I coded in React. And shortly after, I was the lead developer of the company. At this point, my work has spoken for me. Now it's about, how do I get to the next step up? Stars are scaled through alternative routes. There are millions of diverse and different stars in this country who have the skills. Give them a chance to shine. My name is Giancarlo Martinez, and I'm a star.
Wow. What a cool story, huh? Has anybody looked up Giancarlo yet on LinkedIn and connected? Should try to get him to come work for you. And you might think that Giancarlo's story is 1 in a million, but in fact, he's one of millions. But the tech industry has overlooked a lot of these stars because of our hiring practices. And external hiring isn't the only path. You can also look, I'm going to cut short on my what I intended to say here a little bit, but you can really look for internal pathways as well. People who have skills that are adjacent to tech that with just a little training could move into tech jobs with just the opportunity and intentionality. Here's an example of someone who has gone from an IT help desk into, from the call center to IT help desk to SOC analyst to cyber analyst. We just need to support them. But you can see that at the time this research was done, there were no publicly posted jobs in these cyber roles that didn't require a degree, therefore were not open to stars. And I've hired people into coding jobs on my teams from customer service when they got a Udacity degree or went to a coding boot camp, and they're amazing team members and often bring a very diverse background and experience. So I'm completely convinced that this degree alternative pathway is one of the most viable avenues for diversifying the tech workforce in the near term, instead of waiting for 3rd graders to decide to go into STEM fields. And look, I had a chance to go to college, and so nothing against college at all, but I did learn my tech skills on the job, all of us learn on the job, right? Even when we went to college, we come on the job and have a lot to learn. And college isn't the only pathway to get tech skills, right? Not every capable person, these are important words, not every capable person can or went to college. In fact, I think that is often misunderstood that there are 71 million people out there like this. So I'm not sure in tech why we're so wedded to a 4-year degree when we know that it's possible to get tech skills without it. And if we were to welcome in people who are excluded and give them an on-ramp to learning tech, we can fill our open jobs, we can add diversity, we can open up a pathway to socioeconomic mobility for millions of Americans who are being blocked despite all their hard work and skills that they've acquired through alternate routes. And when you give people an opportunity for an amazing career in tech that's safe and future-proof, it has the potential to really change lives for generations. And by the way, gives us this great quality workforce that we need over time. It's a win-win, and there's something we can all do, as you can see here. What I'm really asking you to do by taking these actions is to be an ally, as Jared mentioned early in his comments. And ultimately, I really just am asking you for your allyship. Allyship is just about empathy and action. It means authentically learning and taking courageous action as an advocate for those who are underrepresented, marginalized, or don't have equal opportunity in the workplace or society. And I contend that if we can't have empathy for our own teammates in tech, show compassion and advocate for those who are marginalized, and create an environment that's inclusive and welcoming for everyone, how do we hope to empathize with our customers and build open the most awesome products that really work for everyone, right? And besides, we all have these amazing careers in tech. Why wouldn't we want as many people as possible to join us in the tech field? And if you want to learn more about being an ally and applying your empathetic curiosity, you can check out this brand new book that came out, How to Be an Ally. It was mentioned that I'm donating a few of these to give away at the end, but it's a really awesome way to start to learn and take you on your journey of allyship. And one thing I'm going to tell you about my learnings is it's always ongoing. I'm reading this book myself for the 2nd time. And it also taught me what I can't ignore. I love the words of Sister de la Cruz. She's a poet and nun from Mexico who summed up, I don't study to know more, but to ignore less. And if you haven't read the book Caste, I strongly recommend it. And one of my favorite lines from early in the chapters is, ignorance is no protection from the consequence of inaction. Ignorance is no protection from the consequence of inaction. I think that's pretty amazing, and it's what allyship is really all about. So I know I'm way over time, so I just want to tell you that, you know, if I have any wisdom at all for my career, it's only in looking backward. It wasn't wisdom at the time. Just be open to growth, take calculated risk in pursuing passions. You might just find yourself on your own unexpected pathway. And I hope that you will be a catalyst to help others on an unexpected pathway to get into and to stay in tech. So thank you. And I know, Jared, we are way over time, so I don't know if we have time for any of the Q&A. I'm happy to stay on if there is time for it, but thank you so much for your attention, everybody.
Thank you so much, Julie. I know there'd be rounding applause if we could hear it, but I'll try to start just a little bit.
Thank you, Jared.
So quick logistics. This is a separate Zoom session. So if you want to stay on and ask some questions, as Julie mentioned, she's willing to stick around. Feel free to stay. Otherwise, feel free to jump to your next keynotes. I believe they're supposed to start, and it's 12:07 Eastern time by my clock. So you have about 3 to 4 minutes until those start. So if you have questions, I recommend the Q&A function. We don't have any questions yet. Looks like we had some questions on making sure that the audio was working. If you would like, you can also drop them in the chat. And I didn't see any in the Slack either. But
okay, well, I guess I just was so clear.
Man, I was literally going to say that. I was like, you just clearly, you know, covered the topic.
Come on, you all, there must be some questions.
We got one. First one. Actually, this was one I was something similar to this I was gonna ask you. How do we change the minds of big tech, specifically hiring, so they drop or probably change these degree requirements?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important question. It's exactly what we're working on at Opportunity at Work. You know, I said I'm part-time senior advisor there now. I was actually their interim CTO for 6 months. So had a lot of conversations with a lot of big companies. And what really resonates for them is the story of inequity and the realization that we often think that everyone that wants to go to college can. And everybody is also really dealing with all of these open jobs, right? They're on one hand saying, like, I can't fill all my open jobs. I have this mandate to try to create more diversity in the industry. And yet we're at the same time ignoring an entire population of people like Giancarlo and many more who go get skills in other ways, have the skills if we would just give them a little support, and then we can fill our open jobs. So I would say, Jared, it's a lot about people's real interest in addressing inequity in the society as a whole, realizing that tech is a really great pathway for that because we are hiring, because we have so many open jobs. And that if we rely on the 4-year computer science degree, we just are not going to find our way to, you know, being able to get the workforce that we need. So it's a story that's really resonating. There's some really big companies like IBM and Walmart and Amazon and others who are really seriously on a path to, if not fully removing 4-year degrees, definitely piloting in certain areas on certain types of jobs. So thank you for the question.
Awesome. We do have a couple more. We have one from the audience. How would my company work with Opportunity at Work to improve our diversity pipelines?
Awesome. Opportunity at Work is actually an aggregator. So they're not a training provider, but what they are doing is they have a marketplace platform that I was working on with my little tech team while I was the CTO there. And they connect employers with the training providers that are getting skills, getting people trained in skills, stars trained, and the stars themselves, and they have a marketplace. And so you can contact Opportunity at Work. There's a demo opportunity. There's a contact sheet on their website, and you can have somebody in your recruiting space, your HR space, your D&I space, contact them, and they can work together to get your company onto the Stellar Works is the name of the platform, and start to hire stars and discover stars. It's and there are a number of companies. I think there are 30 major companies right now on the platform who are in some stage of starting to hire stars from the platform.
Awesome. That sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
Next question from Claudia. How can I be an ally when I feel like I don't belong myself? I am a Hispanic woman, and there are times when I feel like I don't belong.
I can totally relate, Claudia. I mean, I can't relate to your intersectional point of view as a white woman myself, but I completely understand that it is a struggle. But here's what I think. I think that if you have been in a place of marginalization, you can feel it in your bones what it is like, and you're not the only population of people who are marginalized. So I feel as if I found that at any point in time, you either need an ally, which there are times when you definitely do, as an intersectional woman in tech, no doubt. But you then can also be an ally, that there are other populations that are also marginalized that you might support. And because you can relate to it, and you might not be able to relate to the story of a Black woman or a person with a disability, or, depending on your gender definition or sexual orientation, you might be able to relate to other people with other marginalized identities. And so I think we all have an opportunity, given the context, to accept allyship or to be an ally for others.
Awesome. Next question is from Danielle. This is actually kind of interesting. So video games and computers and tech are kind of interrelated, and it sounds like Danielle he got into programming because they love video games. By the way, same thing here. I've actually never worked on video games, unfortunately, though. But is there anything, I think the question is more, is there anything unique about the video game industry that we could do to try to help there versus, kind of the broader tech initiatives or tech D&I initiatives?
Yeah, I'm probably not super expert on that. I do recall in some of my early work that kind of like mobile programmers, that the percentage of women was extremely low. And it's super important, right? Because this is where I think, if you think about, in fact, this was part of the influencing of the decline of women in tech, was this perception that the games on phones are what, that's what programmers do. They've developed games on phones. And so people are like, I don't want to do that. Some people do, but a lot don't. And so, it seems so radically important, right, to think about, are games being built for the entire population? Are they appealing? And I can tell you that I remember going to a Girls Who Code camp several years ago up in New York. And these young ladies had spent 10 weeks of their summer. They were high school students. They'd spent 10 weeks of their summer learning to code. And they were right at the end working on their final project. And some of them had created games, but they were so different in the way that they thought about, like, what problem did they want to solve, and then applying game to that sort of problem. And I was like, this is brilliant. And this is the kind of energy and insightfulness and just different backgrounds and unique experiences that these girls are going to bring to the tech field, because they did like creating games, but they were just really different than the games that you would typically see. So it definitely is something that is a focus and in the industry as a whole. And one of our former colleagues from Capital One, in fact, is now working at a gaming company. And he and I were just talking about this topic recently. So just getting more people out there that can really be allies and advocate for, how this can be a positive experience for people. But we do have to get over some cultural challenges, right? And so we have to work on the culture too.
That's a really good example. You had a slide earlier on why diversity matters. And, having a diverse perspective can change things like the experience that you would expect from a game, if you want to call it that.
Absolutely.
Very exciting. Looks like we have about two more. It looks like the question is, what should we do today if we didn't go to college in the traditional kind of age group? What should we go back? And if so, what should we specialize in?
Awesome question. I'm guessing this is somebody who is related to the field, but isn't necessarily like a coder today. Gosh, so many access points today to learn skills, right? There are just so many organizations, both nonprofit and for-profit organizations, that are helping people as career changers. The career changer is a really common pathway. In fact, there was a young woman in her early 30s that I was introduced to by my niece, and she was thinking about this. She had been in a totally different career path and really thought, I think I want to build software. And I worked with her over a number of months as she did her research on, where could she go to get the training and what should she do? And she ended up at a local kind of boot camp where she lives down in North Carolina. And that was great because they also had connections to jobs. So she would be able to get a job locally because she wanted to stay local. And so I think, and then if you look at like what jobs are out there, just was looking at the DICE jobs report, and some of the most common skills that are really in growth mode are in cloud, DevOps, those types of things. Definitely in software engineering, mobile skills are really in demand. And then topping the list from like the top 10 are jobs related to cybersecurity. They are just really, really growing.
Awesome. And our last question is, as you mentioned, women are leaving tech. What do we do about that? How do we encourage them to stick around or continue on that path?
Yeah, look up the Capital One Women in Tech survey that we did a couple years ago. For one, it was some really good research that Capital One sponsored to really try to understand not what causes women to leave, but what is it that keeps women? So of women who stayed, what were the differentiating things that kept them in the industry versus those who left? And it was interesting for me that the same reasons women cited for leaving are the reasons people stay, which means it's very contextual. So it means that, for example, if your boss gives you flexibility that you need, perhaps as you start your family, you're likely to stay. That's what happened to me. I wouldn't have been able to stay in this field had my boss not been flexible with me when I had my children. Women who don't get that flexibility are the ones who leave. Women who have role models in their company, who have other women that they can depend on and look up to and have a group of people that they can relate to, is a differentiator. Whether or not they're getting challenging assignments, and whether or not they're giving equitable assignments, whether or not they feel like they're being paid fairly. These are all things that are in the control of a company and a manager. And I think all of those things are good news because it's not about women not liking coding. In fact, only 3% of women in that survey identified the reason for leaving as being not liking the field. 3%. 97% left for some other reason than that they just didn't like the technology field. And that's a super important fact. And it really just says that it really is about the culture and the circumstances that we create that make it welcoming for people and that they can then endure in the field.
Wow, that is quite a metric. 3%. That is incredible.
Yep. I love it because as some people might remember a certain memo that came out a few years ago about women not having a head for coding. It was super exciting when that survey came out that said, yeah, women actually do have a head and do like the tech field. That's not why they're not a part of it when they leave. It's circumstantial. It's culture.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. So powerful.
Yep.
All right. So that's all we have.
Okay.
For you, but
great.
As a father of two aspiring young engineering developer, my two girls, I think that they're going to be very excited to start their career in tech when we get there. We'll see if they actually do or not. They're 6 and 7. I think they've got a while before they decide that. But
I will tell you that girls apparently decide around 3rd grade whether they're going to pursue STEM or not. So it's never too soon to start exposing them to role models and helping them understand what they could do in the tech field, because children make these decisions very young. So they get a lot of peer pressure that girls shouldn't be smart and shouldn't be good at math and shouldn't be good at science, and that's an unfortunate stereotype and culture that has evolved in the United States that some other countries don't have, quite honestly. So would love to see us overcome that and get more girls to be interested and stay in the STEM fields.
Well, if we'd been on site at an actual conference somewhere, for sure my girls would have shown up. So
That'd been great.
Would have been fun.
Yeah, maybe next time.
Yep, next time. Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all you did and made time for us today. And we really
thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.